Hey everyone, this is the Wounded Womb, mind of Lilith, and today I'm going to be sharing my astrological portrait of the late Kevin Samuels. Kevin Samuels, according to the data I received, was born on March 13th, 1965, and I believe he was born in Oklahoma, even though information online says that he was born in Atlanta. Okay, so this is not going to be a hit piece on him. I'm not here to attack him as a person or his character or to talk about how other people perceived him as far as whether or not I agreed with his stances on relationships. I do think that he was conflicted at the end of his life about what direction he should proceed in as far as his career. He's made some commentary discussing this, and I talked about this before, but I'm going to be discussing the aspects of his chart, okay? I don't have his rising sign, so I'm going to be using his sun as his ascendant. On March 13th, the moon was in about 25 degrees Cancer at like midnight, right? But throughout the day, the moon traversed about 16 degrees into Leo, okay? So there's a 75% chance that he was a moon in Leo, and that is the data I'm going to be using for his chart. I'm not going to be covering every single aspect. To do a full chart analysis would take several hours to do, and I don't do that on this particular platform at this time. Perhaps if I just, create a membership tier on my channel, then I'll just consider doing a full 1.5 to 2 hour discussion. I generally don't like talking that much, especially to myself, by myself. So I try to keep these videos brief, or my commentary brief, about 30 minutes or less, okay? So Kevin Samuels has Sun in Pisces, Moon in Leo, Mercury in Aries, Venus in Pisces, Mars in Virgo, Jupiter in Taurus, Saturn in Pisces, Uranus in Virgo, Neptune in Scorpio, Pluto in Virgo, the North Node in Gemini, Lilith is in Capricorn, and Chiron is in Pisces, which is very, very, very significant. The first thing I noticed was the fact that he had the Sun, Venus, Saturn, and Chiron in the exact same sign, which would mean that it's in the exact same house. Now, they're not in exact conjunction to each other. His Chiron and his Sun are pretty close. His Venus and his Chiron are pretty close, and his Saturn is a little bit away, but they're all communicating with each other because they're in the same house and in the same sign. So this is the deal. Chiron in astrology is an asteroid that represents the wounded healer, the parts of ourselves that we cannot heal or help because it's pretty much out of our hands. The circumstances that have created the wounds within us, we have no control over that. And these are usually wounds associated with a childhood because as children, we don't have control over what happens to us in our lives. And, these are moments of helplessness, of worthlessness, of just pain and deep agony associated with whatever house and sign that this is in. So with Chiron on the Sun, I would suspect that Kevin had a lot of deep insecurities about himself and his identity because of his father. The Sun is the father as well as Saturn. With the Sun and Saturn being in the same house with Chiron, the deep wounds that he has about his identity, his personality, the way he expresses himself, and his masculinity, because Saturn and the Sun are also masculine, as well as Mars, which is opposing his Sun. But there were some really deep wounds that he could not heal associated with his identity, and that was because of his father. Okay, even if his father were in his life, the relationship would have been a source of pain for him. But I think his father wasn't there for him in his life, so it was still a situation that was not, he wasn't happy about it. And it bothered him throughout his life. I suspect this is what happened with him. And when you have Chiron, Chiron gives us the opportunity to heal other people through our experiences, right? So we can't heal ourselves with Chiron, but we can help other people to heal through the pain that we have experienced. And we use our pain to teach others how to go through their own pain or how to heal through their own issues. And with Chiron and Saturn together, I suspect that the whole Godfather moniker that he adopted was a way for him to heal the wounds of being a fatherless child, to help thousands of Black men who were fatherless make peace with that issue. Or he became a surrogate father figure, a godfather to many Black men who did not have their fathers in their lives. So Kevin was born in 65. This is before the feminist wave hit the Black community. This is before welfare supposedly took the Black men out the household. This is before out of wedlock births became so popular in the Black community. This is 65, right? And this is during the Vietnam War. Now, during this time period in American society, Black men were going to war in Vietnam to fight, for the U.S. military. And they came back, their jobs were gone, okay? They came back with PTSD, mental illness, drug issues, and no jobs. Because during this period, we were setting the stage for outsourcing our industrial sector to Asia, which is what we ultimately did. So major urban centers in Detroit, Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, St. Louis, etc., anywhere you could find a large population of Black folk, these jobs were outsourced to Asia. And these Black men came back from these wars. They didn't have the opportunity to take care of their families. They had to learn how to upscale in a whole new economy that had not been created yet. So there was a 10-year period between, maybe 10 to 15 year period between 65 or 70 and 1980, 85, when the service industry became a lot more prominent in our community. So we would have more jobs dealing with maybe telephone operators, computers, McDonald's, not industrial work, working in factories, building things, construction work. Those jobs were largely outsourced. Okay. And so as a result of that, many Black men did not have the opportunity to work. And so they went to crime and to selling drugs and doing drugs. And most importantly, they did not marry the women they impregnated because they could not take care of these women. That is a source of shame for many men, not to be able to take care of their women, especially back in those days. Now, it's a bit more common because women have the opportunity to make money. But back then, women were not largely in the workplace the way they are right now. So the Black community's issues with this out of wedlock marriages started in the 60s when Black men came back from the wars and could not take care of their families in these major cities. They can get the women pregnant, but they couldn't, have sustainable employment. So Kevin was born during this time period. I don't know what happened to his father or with his father, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of the issues that he had. Okay. I think he said his father had a bunch of children. And, during this time period, there was also a large migration or immigration of men from the West Indies to the States. And from my personal experience, a lot of men from the West Indies who traveled to the States, they had no issue having children with a bunch of women and not marrying them. This is just something I've observed. So we had this dual issue in our community. We had a lack of jobs. We also had a mass migration of other Black men who were in the community but did not value marriage to American Black women the way that their other Black American men did, period. I suspect that, again, these men go from place to place to place and have a bunch of children with different women and don't really care about them because they don't have the means to take care of them. They just want to assert their masculinity by getting women pregnant. That is their source of identity and masculinity. I can use my penis to make a woman submit to me and carry on my legacy, but I don't have to take care of that legacy. That was a source of shame for many men in that generation. But anyway, so I suspect that this deep wound that he had with his identity and masculinity, because Chiron is opposing Mars and Saturn is the father, which is the masculine representation that a boy has to look up to as a child. If his father wasn't there, he in his mind did not know how to be a man. In my opinion, not all signs need to have a father figure to be a good father. In my opinion, I'm not saying this is fact, the cardinal signs do really well. The men who are cardinal signs do really well with breaking cycles as far as fatherlessness or needing a male role model to lead them into manhood. They're actually pretty good with breaking certain cycles because cardinal signs are about initiating new cycles and new paradigms, right? So Capricorns, Cancers, Librans, and Arians are pretty good with starting new foundations and traditions for family that break old cycles and generational curses. Not all the time, but most times, in my opinion, that is the case. The other signs, mutables and fixed signs, they kind of carry on the traditions because fixed signs, they repeat what they've already seen, and mutables are in between. They don't really know where to start, and they don't really feel strong enough to assert their identity and dominance in the way that a cardinal sign would. But for Kevin Samuels, I think that the issue that he had with himself that plagued his relationships, because Venus is also here. So his relationships were a source of pain and contention for him. Because again, if you don't know who you are as a man, you don't know your role in a relationship with a woman. So you don't know how to treat a woman well. You may be either too dominant, or you may attract women that that may bully you or dominate over you. So in my opinion, I think with this Chiron here, Kevin's issue with women in relationships was the fact that he did not know how to assert himself as a man. He may have overcompensated because he felt feminine, or he was accused of being feminine. Now with Venus on his sun, Kevin was a pretty man. The Venus on the ascendant is like the dandy, the model, the designer, the person who's the interior decorator, someone who's interested in beauty and fashion, but also who's very charming and who's very diplomatic and who knows how to cultivate relationships with people. This is Venus on the sun. So Kevin was an attractive man, right? And he liked nice clothes. He liked looking good. It wasn't because he was gay necessarily, but because with Venus on the sun, his appearance was a part of his identity. He liked to look good. He liked to smell good. He liked to look like he has money, especially with Saturn and Venus together. Saturn and Venus is somebody who likes classical fashion, okay? Suits and, little black dresses, pearls, pencil skirts, okay? Subtle but high quality fashion. That is Venus and Saturn. But with the male being here as Saturn and Venus together, his expression of masculinity may have been more feminine than he would have liked. And he would have blamed his lack of father for this, but that's just Venus being on his sun. He was meant to be somebody who's interested in perfumes and makeups and appearances and how one man looks. And in a different world, he could have been really successful as an image consultant if he were born at a different time, or even if he had a different networking circle. I don't know what was going on in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is not really good for that type of industry in general. A city like New York or Miami or Chicago or Atlanta or even Los Angeles, he would have probably done very well in. So he was kind of born in the wrong place to do what he wanted to do. And I don't think the people in his community appreciated him for his natural gifts. And so with Venus opposite Pluto. Now, Venus deals with what we desire, love, charmingness, communication, harmony, balance, our ability to seduce others too. And it's opposing Mars and Pluto, right? So with Venus opposing Mars, there's a difficulty in integrating desire with action. A person may become too aggressive, or they're not aggressive enough. They oscillate between being submissive and being dominant, right? And this is especially true if, again, you have issues with your masculinity or issues asserting yourself or your dominance towards other people, okay? Because you don't think that you're man enough, or people told you you're too soft or too whatever. A man or woman with this particular aspect would have issues with expressing masculinity or balance and harmony. They would go from being too compliant to being too aggressive. There was never a balance, okay? I think towards the end of his life, he learned how to integrate both in his character that he created, okay? The character was who? Kevin Samuels, the man in the suit, right? Saturn, a tailored suit, a black suit. It's also Saturn. Somebody who is very particular about their appearance. There's a whole setting, scenery, ambiance, right? That's Venus too. He had a ritual, okay? Rituals are also Venus. The ritual was the music that he put on his show, that he presented. He had the ritual of the Red Bull, right? This was all setting up the scene and the stage for this illusion of this fantasy of this character that he had created. And this character that he had created was able to integrate the masculine and feminine aspects of himself. So the masculine being, being dominant towards women, shutting women down, controlling women, giving men guidance and direction, being a leader in a specific space. That is Mars. But he used Venus to do this too. Now you got the suits, right? The perfume, the music, the imagery, the whole presence, and people were allured by that because he is a Piscean. Pisceans are the Pied Pipers of the zodiac. They know how to create fantasy and magic more than any other sign, period. And with Venus here, he knew how to sell himself. He was a magician, right? I'm not going to say a manipulator, but he was a magician. He knew how to create fantasy and illusion and imagination. He was a fantasy of the Godfather, right? The surrogate father to millions of men, black men especially, who needed that guidance, who wanted to be him, to look up to them. They respected the way he composed himself. He was very intelligent. He has Mercury in Aries. He had an aggressive intelligence that was good for analysis, for calculations, for deductions, for incisiveness, right? For debates, arguments. He was good at that. I think he was studying to be an engineer or architect, something in mathematics. That is Mars in Aries, okay? That's Mercury in Aries. He also had Mercury in the second house. Once he leaned into this part of himself, he was able to make more money. Mercury deals with exchanging of ideas and resources and information, but it's also in his second house of finances. So he was able to garner more money by incorporating his ability to debate with other people, to analyze people, to, what's the word I'm looking for? To use his incisive, sharp analysis and ability to assess people, to basically teach the community about relationships, because his whole thing was about relationships and beauty. That's Venus, right? His whole shtick, not just relationships as far as men and women, but again, your relationship with yourself, how you look, your hygiene, how much money you're making, your appearance. That is very important when you're dealing with relationships. And with Kevin, that was his expertise. That is something he was naturally good at. If he was a white guy, he would probably be more famous, to be honest. So Kevin didn't get enough credit for what he was able to do with the platform that he had. And he kind of hit his stride at a later age. The sun in Pisces is not really strong here. It doesn't like to be here. The sun likes to be in the first house, the fifth house, the ninth, and the 10th even. The 12th house of Pisces is like you don't get your shine till later on. You don't get enough credit. People don't see you for who you are. You are not given your accolades until really late in life, or you're not given the credit that you deserve when you deserve it. This is somebody who is cheated out of a lot of opportunities for whatever reason, right? And with Kevin having the sun in Pluto, the sun in Pisces opposite Pluto, the sun deals with a person's vitality and their health as well. In Pisces, it rules the feet and the lymphatic system. So with the sun opposite Pluto and the sun opposite Mars and the sun opposite Uranus, Kevin had a lot of health issues, as well as sun conjunct Saturn, okay? He had a lot of health issues in his life. I'm going in a whole tangent here, but I should have started here first. With the sun opposite Pluto and the sun that is ruled by the feet and lymphatic system, he would have issues with these areas of his life when it comes to his health. He revealed that he had some sort of lymphoma or some sort of cancer at a young age that affected his lymphatic system. That is sun opposite Pluto in Pisces. Pluto deals with changes that are subtle, hidden, these changes are usually painful, and they're usually permanent, right? When you have cancer, your body changes permanently. Through the treatments or whatever you have to do to heal, your body chemistry permanently changes. Pluto deals with subtle, hidden changes that are deadly, okay? And because it rules the sign of Scorpio, this is why a lot of people don't trust Scorpios, because Scorpion people in general, or Scorpionic individuals, people with Pluto conjunct their sun, moon, or ascendant, or even their Mars, these are individuals who know how to strike in secret, who knows how to uncover people's secrets and mysteries and things that other people don't want them to know, and use them as weapons against their enemies. Okay, so but anyway, Pluto deals with diseases. A disease is something that's hidden, right? Illnesses, sexually transmitted diseases, cancers, things that you cannot see but affect your body permanently, like poisons. You can't see a poison, but you know it's affecting your body, right? You know it's there. So Pluto being opposing his sun, he would have these long periods where things were going on inside his body that he didn't know about until a crisis point hit, and then he would find out, oh, I have cancer, or something else pops up. I think a couple of years ago, he got his foot injured by his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, who was jealous. I think I remember reading somewhere that he did some sort of jump and somebody tried to hit him with a car and it broke his foot. Okay, that is Uranus opposite the sun and Pluto. Uranus deals with unexpected, abrupt, sudden changes as well. And with it opposing the sun, that is the 7th house. So there's a 7th house component to a lot of the issues that he has in his life. Most of the problems that he had in his life came from other people, especially with Mars, Pluto, and Uranus being in his 7th house. He had to compete for everything. He had to fight for everything that he had, right? And when he walked into a room, he had a very powerful presence about him with the sun opposite Pluto. Anybody with Pluto on angular houses, okay, 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th house, these are very powerful people that command the room that they're in. Regardless of whether they're paying attention to anybody or not, people are forced to pay attention to them, and as a result, they inspire jealousy or admiration depending on the disposition of the person who's observing them. So with Kevin Samuels having Pluto opposite his sun, he had a very powerful presence. He had the ability to affect people by his very being. But I don't think he saw this power within himself, because again, with Chiron, he didn't know who he was. He had a weak sense of identity, and there was pain associated with the identity, and he had to learn how to channel that pain into a medium to help other people. And his platform was a perfect way of doing that. And I think once he accomplished his goal, he was taken out. He had successfully completed his karma for this lifetime. There was no need for him to go forward. Okay? So the karma, in my opinion, was for him to find his own worth, to accept himself for who he is, and to use that as an opportunity to help others to heal from the same wounds or injuries that he had of feeling worthless or selfless, or someone who was invisible, who didn't have any value to other people. This whole high value man shtick, all of the monikers and the idioms and the sayings that he used in his commentary was a way for him to speak to himself, to the part of himself that had been the recipient of negative language and abusive rhetoric and behavior from other people about his worth. So, for example, when he talked about high value men, he was manifesting this for himself. He was teaching himself this. He was training himself to believe in himself, which is why when he started to say certain things, he wasn't talking to his audience. He was talking to himself. He was trying to heal himself through his audience, but it benefited the audience too, because that's what Chiron does. Chiron gives us the ability to heal others through our wounds that we have had difficulty healing, okay? Kevin never had his father in his life, right? In the way that he wanted to. There was nothing he could do about that, because children don't have control over anything. So he had to learn how to deal with that open sore of not having a father around, and as a result, not having his identity. And many men need to stop blaming women for the fathers not being in their children's lives, because a lot of men are trash. They're garbage. A lot of men don't work well in situations where they have to be domesticated. A lot of men need to be in the wild where they belong. Okay, this is why in certain animal kingdoms and families, and back in the day, the men were not around the kids like that. They had their own little tribe with the men, right? They had their own little clique with the men. The women in the village were with the babies. All the women raised the children together, and then when the babies got of age, they went with the men, the boys especially. Okay, when the boys got of age, they went with their fathers and other men in the community. This whole men and women cohabitating together, it does not work well in many instances, because a lot of men are wild by nature. They're not supposed to be them. In my opinion, this is just me. People may disagree, but in my opinion, a lot of men become resentful of women when they're forced to live with them. Men don't want to be domesticated in some cases, especially men who have Venus opposite Uranus, which is what Kevin Hart had. Men with the Sun opposite Uranus, Venus opposite Uranus, Mars opposite square, or anything that is angular to Uranus, these are individuals who have a difficult time maintaining traditional relationships. Men and women, right? Now, I have Uranus in my 5th house. Traditional relationships are boring to me, right? Doesn't mean that they're not good for anybody else. But for me, I get bored with the typical relationship dynamic, okay? Going to the movies, getting something to eat, having sex, and then going home. That's boring for me. I need to be doing something that is inspiring, that teaches me new things, that makes me see the world in a different way. That is different. It's just different. Doesn't mean cheating. It just means, stimulate me intellectually. Okay. Figure out a way of having fun that's not the way that everybody else would consider having fun in their relationships. Not everybody else, but yeah. Anyway, so Kevin had Uranus opposite his Sun. He was not built for traditional marriages. He needed a lot of independence and freedom in his relationships. And he was teaching his audience to think this way. Now again, Kevin Samuels was talking about himself when he was talking to his audience. Okay? He was preaching about himself. He is not the kind of person that needed a traditional relationship. But not just that, he wanted a relationship where he would dominate his partner, because he had Pluto opposite his Venus. A person with Pluto opposite Venus is usually very possessive, or they attract people who are possessive and dominating and don't know how to share power. These are people who are manipulative in relationships. They don't know how to compromise in partnerships at all. Pluto doesn't compromise. It is my way or the highway. So Kevin could have attracted women like this, or he could have been the perpetrator in these situations as someone who does not know how to compromise in relationships, especially if he's trying to overcompensate for feeling like less than a man because of his father not being in his life. So the way that Kevin was talking about relationships was a reflection of his own experiences and his own psychological disposition about relationships based on his issues with his masculinity. Again, he has Venus opposite Mars. There was no balance here. He didn't know how to integrate it well. Yes, he was attractive in a conventional sense. I didn't personally find him that way, but I could understand why many women would find him attractive. With Pluto opposite Venus, again, a very attractive person. Mars conjunct Pluto, very sexually attractive, very sexually virile person. Somebody who is dominating sexually, who likes rough sex even, who likes to be in control in the bedroom, who doesn't mind spanking a woman, during sex as well. And again, this is no judgment, because, a lot of us have these aspects. Venus conjunct Mars, Venus opposite Mars, Venus square Mars. There's this aspect in his chart, okay? So he's not the only one, but he is the kind of person that likes rough relationships, or he attracted rough relationships, okay? Rough meaning there was a war between the male and the female ego, basically. He was either too dominant or too submissive. If he was too submissive, he would overcorrect and become too dominant, or even potentially abusive, verbally, psychologically, or physically. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm talking about this particular aspect. So he is the kind of person who wanted complete submission from his partner. Pluto in the 7th, I own you. Mars in the 7th, I own you. Saturn opposite Mars, again, I own you. Saturn square opposite Mars, even conjunct Mars, is rough. This is somebody who's relentless. So Saturn is an immovable object and Mars is an unstoppable force. When you have these two planets in a negative aspect or a stressful aspect, a square, opposition, or even conjunction, these are two malefic planets that cause problems in relationships. These are individuals who don't know how to compromise or share power. And they usually end up living alone because they don't know how to share power. They don't know how to compromise with people. When you're in the 7th house of relationships, that is balance. That's Libra, right? Side note, I mentioned Kevin's health before. He has Mars in the 7th from his sun. This could indicate a wound or a cut or a mark or some sort of burn or something on his stomach, because Libra represents the kidneys, the seminal fluid or reproductive fluid, as well as the lumbar, right, area, which is like the stomach, the trunk of the body. So he may have a wound or laceration in this area. I think he talked about this with DJ Vlad when he mentioned that he had to have his stomach cut open to take out this huge tumor that he had. So that would be Mars in the 7th house for him. Okay. So anyway, Mars in the 7th, this is somebody who has to fight in his relationships. There's competition in his partnerships. He competes with his partners or his partners compete with him. The 7th house is the house of open enemies, right? He had a lot of open enemies. And he had also alliances too. But he had a lot of open enemies, as we could see when he passed away. Okay? Again, with his ex-girlfriend's ex-boyfriend hitting him with the car, that's an open enemy. I think Kevin said he was into martial arts too. Mars in the 7th house is the athlete, the warrior, the martial artist, the soldier, anybody into fighting, into sports. That is Mars in the 7th house as well. So Kevin's relationships were a source of contention for him, regardless. With Pluto here too, this is destructive. Pluto and Uranus, destructive. Okay? Now, there were rumors that was saying that Kevin died while he was being intimate with somebody. That is Mars, Pluto, and Uranus in the 7th house. Now, why do I say this? Okay, so at this point, right, the 6th house from Pluto would be, the 6th house from Pisces would be Leo, and the 8th house from Pisces would be Libra. Okay? Libra is the 7th house, right? So we have Pluto at this point in Capricorn squaring Libra, okay? And it has been since 2008. So we have Pluto squaring his 8th house of death, okay? We have Saturn squaring or opposing his 6th house of health. Then we have Mars, Uranus, and Pluto in Kevin Samuel's 7th house of open enemies and relationships. With Mars in the 7th, it's like, and Pluto in the 7th too, is almost like death at the hands of a partner, either through murder or, again, sexual acts where you overexert yourself. And it's unexpected and quick. That's Uranus. Uranus is unexpected, fast, quick endings. And Uranus is square Kevin Samuel's 6th house of health. Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018 and will leave in 2025. So when you have malefic planets squaring your 6th and 8th houses of health and death, and then the 7th is activated by Mars and Pluto natally anyway, I wouldn't be surprised if he died before, during, or after sex because of a heart condition. Okay, because Leo deals with the heart. And if his moon is in Leo, right? In Vedic astrology, the moon is the physical body, not just the sun, like Western astrology. The moon is more indicative of health in Eastern astrology or Vedic than it is in the West. So with Saturn opposing the moon too, his life force was going to be in jeopardy. As a side note, I don't know if you guys have noticed that we've lost a few people who were Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, or Pisces over the past couple of years. I believe DMX, Black Rob, we have Kevin Samuels, Joel died in over the weekend. Dave Chappelle was attacked by somebody who had a weapon. He could have potentially been hurt very seriously. So there is an issue now with the mutable signs. Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces have to be extra careful with their health. While Pluto is in Capricorn and Saturn is in Aquarius and Uranus is in Taurus. Why? For example, Gemini's 6th house would be in Scorpio. Scorpio is being squared by Saturn at this point with Aquarius and is opposed by Uranus. That's their 6th house of health. The 8th house from Gemini is Capricorn. That is being conjunct by Pluto. Pluto deals with unexpected changes, but that are subtle and permanent, okay? And, devastating. This is going to be true for every mutable sign for the next 1 to 2 years, because Pluto is going to be entering Aquarius in a few months, actually within a year or so. Then it's going to retrograde. Okay. So mutable signs, Sagittarians, Pisces, Geminis, and Virgos, please be very careful with your health over the next 2 or 3 years. Don't do anything ridiculous. Okay. Some things you can't control, but do the best that you can to fortify your immune system at this time, okay? So anyway, with Chiron and Pluto opposing each other, this is somebody who inflicts pain on others as well. If Chiron's on the sun, which is the identity, and then Pluto is opposing that, this is somebody who has a way of being very destructive towards other people psychologically by agitating or ripping the band-aid off of deep wounds that people have in their psyche related to their worth, their self-worth. So when he says something to a woman like, if you're over 35, you're undesirable. Chiron says, I can't do anything about getting older. I can't fix that. That's out of my control. Now you're going to feel bad in perpetuity. Pluto, right? Permanently. I'm going to make you feel bad about getting older because that is the way I feel about myself. I feel bad about getting older. That's why I had to lie about my age in a sense, right? I feel bad about my identity and my worth and things that I have no control over. So I'm going to project that onto you. And this is also Mars. Mars deals with weaponization as well. So even though Kevin tried to heal people initially when he was talking about relationships and not wanting to bash Black women because he knew that he would get a lot of support if he did that, he was conflicted about that. What happened is that he weaponized this. He weaponized people's deepest pain and insecurities about their weight, about their appearance, about their race, about their age, about their value in society. He weaponized this against these people, right? And he caused a lot of deep wounds in women, or he re-agitated or aggravated these wounds in these women to kind of force them to heal. Because what happens is when you reactivate a wound, you have to look at, why am I hurting? If this is making me hurt, why is it making me hurt? And now I have the opportunity to understand my own pain and maybe help to fix it. So Kevin's method was basically hurting you to help you heal. That is what happened to him. He had to be hurt by life and relationships and his father and things like that to heal his own issues of worthlessness and self-doubt and insecurity, which is so Saturn conjunct Sun, Saturn conjunct Chiron. This is like, very insecure, painfully insecure. And not by choice necessarily, but by circumstances that are beyond your control. You can't control your father not being in your life, right? And you can't control how other people perceive you because you have a naturally feminine nature or a feminine way of expressing yourself. Kevin couldn't help the fact that he had a Venus on his sun. He couldn't help the fact that he liked fashion and beauty and appearance and makeup and cosmetics and perfumes and clothes. He couldn't help that. But people judged him for it, and he incurred a lot of injury emotionally and psychically because of this, right? A part of his demeanor was an armor. That suit he put on was his sort of armor to go into war. I'm going to be me. I'm going to embrace myself fully. I am a dandy. I'm a man who loves clothes and fashion and beauty, but I also love relationships and women. I'm going to integrate these two aspects of myself to create a platform for people to heal through my own pain. So that takes me to the North Node in Gemini, which is very important. Gemini is the sign of communication, thinking, relaying information, distributing information, disseminating facts, so on, right? And with his North Node being in the 4th house, aspecting his 10th house, he was destined to have a career working from home. A career working from home, communicating to people. That's the 10th house. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. He became more successful when he worked from home and used his voice as his career. Then he integrated his interest in fashion and beauty, right? And relationships, that's Venus too, with critique and analysis and competitiveness. How do we get women to compete for these men? How do we get women to compete for us? We are the prize now. How do I put myself on top of the manosphere? What can I use as a shtick to distinguish myself from the other thousands of men talking about women in relationships? I know I can basically give them real talk. I can be verbally brutal and blunt with them. That's Mars, right? He has Mercury in Aries. That's basically Mercury conjunct Mars. I can be very direct and honest with them from my perspective, using my own wounds as a way to inform my analysis and assessment of these women, okay? So what he did was he created a competitive atmosphere. Unfortunately, it wasn't a collaborative environment. The men and the women in his community that were affected by Kevin Samuels, they didn't feel like they were working together. They felt like they were in competition with each other. Kevin Samuels' platform became an outward expression and manifestation of the conflict that he had between masculine and feminine energy and expression, right? So the fact that men and women were competing and fighting each other because of his words, that is a manifestation of his psychological disposition. So people were internalizing his conflict within himself. And this is why a lot of Black women celebrated, or they were relieved that he was gone, because they did not like the competition that was being fostered between men and women. So a man would say to a woman who listened to Kevin Samuels, even though I am, not that attractive, at least I'm not 35 years old and older. That makes me more high value than you. That means I'm worth more than you. That means you have to submit to me, because we're in competition. When we're in this competition, there's submission, right? When you're equal, there's no submission. There's just collaboration and cooperation. You can't say you want to have a woman that's collaborative and cooperative with you, but you are using submission at the same time. Submission and cooperation don't work. Okay? Slaves were not cooperating with their submission. They were dominated over. That's a contradiction. Submission is Mars. Cooperation is Venus. Okay? Oppression is Mars. Venus is harmony. We can see the dichotomy and the conflict in his own psychology and his own way of thinking based on this paradox, right? What is the paradox? Male versus female. That is something he had to contend with because he didn't have his father in his life. So he didn't know how to express masculinity, or he didn't know. He couldn't identify with the masculine aspects of himself comfortably. And he blamed femininity for that. And it wasn't that. It was just the fact that he was naturally somebody who was predisposed to being a fashionista, a dandy, a model, right? And that wasn't considered masculine before the whole metrosexual movement. Okay? He was born a little too early in the wrong time period. So he was kind of ahead of his time. But he kind of caught up with the time period and became very successful. Then he was pulled out because he accomplished what he was supposed to, which was to find his value, to find his self-esteem. When he would tell men, you are worth something. Okay, you've done a lot of great things. He was talking to himself. He was counseling and being a therapist for himself. And these men internalized it and weaponized this message against women because, again, there's Mars and Pluto here. Kevin's message was not about collaboration with women. It wasn't about cooperation with women. It was about dominance and subjugation of women to assert one's own masculinity and sense of identity. And that was the bone of contention. Of course, when he dies, he's going to have the same issue crop up because that was what was happening in real life, right? These men are so oblivious to it because they're used to the idea of dominating over women. They think that's supposed to be the natural order. That is not the natural order. That's an imbalance. Nobody should be dominating over anybody else. There has to be equality in relationships. This is why many women don't want to get married, because they saw their mothers become submissive and subjugated and conquered and oppressed by the men they were married to. And these men don't understand that. And neither did Kevin Samuels. Or he acted like he didn't understand it. But with Pluto being in the 7th house, I wouldn't be surprised if that was an issue for him. Him expecting complete dominance and control in his relationships. If I can't have it my way, if I can't go out here and do my own thing and be with a bunch of different women and cheat, not saying that's what he was doing, but that's kind of the message he was putting out. That's Venus and Pluto opposite each other, conjunct Mars, right? And Uranus, okay? If I can't have my own freedom and do whatever I want to do and you still be here because you're my property, the way I want you to be, we're going to have a problem. So Kevin did not know how to be in relationships. And the people who follow him are going to follow the same blueprint because Kevin was not about collaboration. He was about domination and submission. And that's because he had Mars in the 7th house. Relationships were a source of competition for him. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD or all this money. I'm still the man here. You're still older. You're still undesirable. You're still unwanted. You're still a black woman. You're still on the opposite spectrum of the beauty, scale, right? You're not as beautiful as other women. There's a competition here. So even though you have all of this, I still win because I'm a man and I say so. That is an issue. That's an imbalance. And women naturally like balance. We're Venusian. That's why they say women are ruled by Venus and men are ruled by Mars. We like equality and balance in relationships. This is why many black women help their men to level up. They don't mind sharing power in their relationships. This is why I talk about Melody and Martell all the time. Melody wanted to help her man become a better version of himself. Martell wanted to subjugate and dominate her. And this is the bone of contention in most black relationships now. Men wanting to dominate and subjugate women as if we were in 1952, but they don't have the resources to do so or the social cachet or the respect to garner such authority over women. Okay? And that is the issue that we're having in our relationships. I'll get into that in another commentary. So the problem that Kevin created, unfortunately, I don't think it was intentional for him, but he had to kind of sacrifice himself too, because the sun in Pisces deals with self-sacrifice. He sacrificed his morals. He did not want to bash black women, but he had to do it to build his platform and garner attention and to have deep conversations with people, right? Pluto deals with transformation and change. His identity, his very being was a source of change and transformation in black society and the manosphere in general. This is all Plutonian people. Pluto on the angular houses, if you have Sun conjunct Pluto, again, conjunct square, opposition Pluto, in general, you have a very powerful presence and people may be intimidated by you for no reason other than the fact that you show up and you don't care about the people around you per se. You're not too focused on getting approval by others, but also with Pluto on the angular houses, this is like a very magnetic aspect. You can change the energy and vibration of any room you walk into just by being there. You don't have to say anything. So I'll give you an example. There's a room full of people wearing t-shirts and jeans and sneakers and Timberlands or whatever. Then somebody walks in with a 3-piece suit. They don't say anything. They just walk in and sit in the corner. And they're looking at everybody. That is Pluto on the angular houses. You command respect just by walking in the room. Not literally wearing a suit, but you just command respect and attention by walking into the room. So Kevin commanded respect and attention just by his mere presence. And the presentation, he basically adhered to his gifts. His gifts as a Piscean, a Neptunian, a Jupiterian, somebody who can sell fantasy and illusion and imagery and magic. He became a magical, mythical creature, right? Kevin Samuels said this. He's the godfather. Nobody really knew who he was, right? He was just this older man who dressed very well, who was very classy, and who was very different from the typical pants sagging, baggy t-shirt wearing, Timberland wearing, tattoo having individual who does not put any effort or attention into their appearance at all. Back in the day, Kevin Samuels was normal. Back in the day, a lot of black men took pride in their appearance. But after the Vietnam War, it went downhill. People just started to just go into this deep depression because of the drugs and the poverty and the lack of opportunity economically, and then the crime. I mean, the fashion was still popping in the 70s, but in the 80s, oh my God, it just went downhill from the 80s. Okay, so yeah, Kevin Samuels was like a reminder of these old school, genteel, sophisticated, classy black male figure. He was very Saturnian in appearance, which is why many men looked up to him as a father. The irony is, again, this happened when he didn't have a father figure himself. He had to tap into that Saturnian energy, that serious, dominating, disciplined, persistent, controlled, steely exterior of a Saturn conjunct Sun opposite Pluto individual. And men respected him for that. He wasn't a rah-rah Tupac type of dude, right? That was yelling and screaming all the time. No, he composed himself. And many men, again, missed that type of energy in their childhood. They didn't have any father figures. They had their mothers who unfortunately may have had to scream at them because they didn't have the physical dominance as a single mother, right? To get their children under control, especially the boys. So a lot of times women yell at their children to assert dominance because they think that's what that is. And by and large, that's not effective when it comes to disciplining children. Children need to see action. They don't want to hear what you're saying. They want to see you doing something to prove what you're saying. And so, yeah, Kevin, he used his apparatus to help heal himself, which he did successfully, I believe. And that's why he didn't have to be here anymore. He accomplished his goals. These men, if they respected Kevin, what they would do is finish his work. His work was not to create conflict between men and women. It happened that way, but that's not what he wanted. He wanted men and women to come together, but because of his own issues and unhealed wounds, he made relationships a gladiator sport. Men and women shouldn't be competing with each other to see who's worth the less. Who's the least worthy in our community? Who's the ugliest? Who's the poorest? Who's the fattest? Who's the loneliest? That is what he created. That's competition. That is not collaboration. That's not cooperation. A cooperative woman is not going to be submissive to you. A cooperative woman is equal to you. She will listen to you, and then she'll share her thoughts about what's going on. And then you guys can come to a mutual understanding that benefits both parties. Not say, you do what I say because you're my slave and you're the woman. That is breeding contention and conflict and competition. That is why many women could not deal with Kevin Samuels. And these men actually showed their hand. These men actually proved that they don't want equal partnership. They want to control, dominate, and subjugate women. Why would they want to do this? Because they think that women are beneath them. And how do men treat things that are beneath them? Like shit. So men want to have the agency and the power to continue to control women the way they used to back in the day. But those days are over. We're in the Aquarian age now. The Piscean age of sacrificing oneself for relationships is over. This is about liberation, freedom, independence, self-expression, right? And basically being by yourself. Respecting yourself, honoring yourself by yourself. Not giving a damn about what other people think about you and other people accepting you. That is Aquarius and Leo. Period. That traditional model of relationships is done. If there is no equality, there is no relationship. Pisces and Virgo is slavery and oppression. One person has to sacrifice themselves for the other. That is the old age. Aquarius requires equality. Period. Leo is about independent self-expression and me first. And Aquarius is about the collective, the community, society. If you are not at whole within yourself, if you're not a whole person individually, you can't be a good partner to anybody else. You can't be a good friend to anybody else. You can't contribute to society the way you want to if you are not whole or at peace within yourself. If you can express yourself fully as a Leo. I'm speaking about the energetic expression of the polarity itself, not individual people, but yeah. We're in the Aquarian age now. It is no longer the age of I'm going to slave and sacrifice my life and my happiness for an ungrateful, abusive, alcoholic man who cheats on me. Those days are done by and large. And as time progresses, they'll be even more done. So these men need to get used to it. Did I miss anything? This is about an hour. I'm going to end it right there. I think I've said everything I need to say. Again, Kevin was very intelligent as a person. He was very incisive, analytical, a great mathematical mind, a great mind for assessment. He had an aggressive intelligence. He knew how to capitalize off of people's mental deficiencies to make money. Great at debating and arguments and things like that. But unfortunately, because he has Venus opposite Mars in the 7th house situation, he created more conflict and contention in relationships between black men and women, because that was an expression of what was going on internally within him. He was trying to use his platform to heal himself and to manifest an identity that he could live through to help heal himself. He created an avatar, in a sense, right? And once the avatar was created and he fully began to accept his power and his worth and his value, and he knew who he was, and he healed that wound within himself, in a sense, about his identity and masculinity by integrating all his gifts together into one, he was taken out. There's no need for you to be here anymore. You have done your work. Okay? Now his followers have to be smart enough to do what he was not able to do, which was to bring together the community and to end the fighting and competition between men and women. Because by and large, men will lose this competition, because guess what? More women than men are happy being by themselves. More women are willing to die alone and be celibate than men. Women are not the ones who will go on mass shootings because they can't get any penis. This is a male problem. Women are not the ones kidnapping men for penises. This is a male problem. Okay? So in general, women don't need men as much as men need women. So both sides have to call a truce and say, you know what? We're both valuable to each other. We both mean a lot to each other. We both have something to contribute to the relationship. We're equal. We're equal partners. We're not enemies. We're not competitors. I don't want submission. I want cooperation and collaboration as an equal partner. Okay? Oh, I forgot one more thing. When I first saw Kevin, I thought he was Aquarian because he has a very high forehead and a long face. And if he was Aquarian, it would make sense that he had an issue with self-esteem and value and even money, because that would put his sun, Venus, Saturn, and Chiron in the 2nd house of resources and wealth, where Taurus usually is. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he had an Aquarius or Leo ascendant, because that would mean that he would have a square between his personality and his emotional expression, if he had, or an opposition between his personality and his emotional expression, or what made him feel comfortable and nurtured as a man. This would be because of an issue between his mother and his father as well. I could be incorrect, but I wouldn't be surprised if he had an Aquarius ascendant in his chart. And that's it for now. Wow, this is the longest I've ever talked on this platform. Interesting. I look forward to reading your comments. Please don't get offended by what I said earlier about, mass immigration, being partially responsible for some of the out of wedlock births in the Black community. I have data to back this up. So I live in New York City. I've seen this is not something that's uncommon. It's still very prevalent in the islands now. Now, I'm not talking about all Black men or all men from the Caribbean who do this. I'm not saying that at all. I'm suspecting that's what happened. And if not, again, there are plenty of Papa was a Rolling Stones in the Black community that were Native Black Americans. So both sides contributed to this issue of single mothers and out of wedlock births in the Black community, okay? All right, thank you guys for listening. I look forward to reading your feedback. If you'd like to order a reading, go to mindoflilith.com. The site will be down for maintenance for Saturday and Sunday, but Monday I'll be back in business, and I look forward to reading your comments again. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.